Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for thank you all for coming tonight. I know it's cold out there. I'm Leslie Markle. I'm the curator for public art here at the Kemper Art Museum, and we're fortunate to have distinguished panelists with us tonight. Phil Valko, who's the director of sustainability here at Washington University. Don Koster, who's an architect and senior lecturer here, and Juan William Chávez, who's an artist and activist. I'll go ahead and give a formal introduction. I just wanted to say Gretchen Wagner, unfortunately, is not able to attend. She slipped and fell yesterday and is recovering, hopefully having a speedy recovery, but she could not attend tonight. So I'll be filling in a little bit for her. She was going to talk about a collaborative project called Pixel. Juan William Chávez, just to introduce Juan, he's the artist on our panel, and he's also a cultural activist who explores the potential of space through creative initiatives that address community and cultural issues. He has exhibited at venues such as Art in General, Contemporary Art Museum St. Louis, White Flag Projects, and Van Ab Museum. Chávez founded Poot's Contemporary Art Space, a nonprofit organization that offers support to emerging artists and curators. And since 2010, he's focused on socially engaged projects and collaborations in North St. Louis. Projects include Urban Expression for the Pulitzer Foundation for the Arts, Vertigo Bee Sanctuary, and Northside Workshop. He has received awards and grants from Creative Capital, the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation, the Graham Foundation for Advanced Studies in the Fine Arts, Art Matters, and the Gateway Foundation. Juan holds a BFA from Kansas City Art Institute and an MFA from the School of Art Institute of Chicago. Don Koster, as I said, is an architect and educator committed to the design of contemporary sustainable environments. He is the founder of Nelson Koster Architects, an award-winning design practice located in St. Louis, Missouri. He's a senior lecturer here at the Sam Fox School of Design and Visual Arts. Koster's practice and research are concerned with the development of place-based site and environmentally responsive design solutions with a focus on community redevelopment and contemporary housing design. He has received numerous grants and awards for both academic and professional work. Koster is leading the research efforts on the renovation of Washington University off-campus housing in an effort to reach net zero energy, water, and waste. He's also involved with the Sunflower Project. He's a leader for this part of the Land Lab project in North St. Louis, Sunflower Project STL. It's a research project aimed at addressing issues of urban land vacancy in North St. Louis. Phil Valko, as I said, he's the director of sustainability here at Washington University. He works with senior administrators, faculty, staff, and students to incorporate and implement sustainable practices into the university's operational procedures, resource management, and strategic planning. Valko is a Washington University alum and earned a bachelor's degree in biology and environmental science from the School of the Arts and Sciences in 2003. Prior to joining the university, Phil was the active living program manager for TrailNet, an organization that promotes walking, bicycling, hiking, and conservation events throughout the St. Louis region. In that role, Valko's accomplishments include coordinating the development of TrailNet's Healthy, Active, and Vibrant Communities initiative, which is being replicated in 7 communities throughout Missouri, serving as lead author for the Healthy, Active, and Vibrant Community Toolkit, offering a peer-reviewed panel with Dr. Ross Brownson here at Washington University, and partnering with local municipalities to pass complete streets policies which ensure that roads will be designed to support walking, biking, and public transit. In addition, Valko was the founder and executive director of the Urban Studio, an organization which offered concerts, classes, and programs for all ages in North St. Louis, and included the Urban Studio Cafe, a gathering place for the community. Since this is just to frame the discussion a little bit, I wanted to keep my comments brief and get to our first presentation. The presentations will be just about 5 to 7 minutes each, and then we'll have a panel discussion after that. Creative placemaking, just to give a little definition for it, this is the NEA's definition, which is taken from Ann Marcuson's white paper that she wrote in 2010. As you're probably aware, creative placemaking and the idea for creative placemaking, there was an effort around that time to really create a national policy platform to support funding initiatives for creative placemaking. And this was really under the former NEA chair. Ann Marcuson, who's an economist, has done a lot of work in this area, and she has her white paper includes several case studies about creative placemaking. In creative placemaking, partners from public, private, nonprofit, and community sectors strategically shape the physical and social character of a neighborhood, town, tribe, city, or region around arts and cultural activities. Creative placemaking animates public and private spaces, rejuvenates structures and streetscapes, improves local business viability and public safety, and brings diverse people together to celebrate, inspire, and be inspired. I took a look at her white paper, which is called Creative Placemaking, in preparation for this again. And it's really interesting, the unique partnerships and the kind of common cause that's found through those unique partnerships in creative placemaking initiatives. And so I think some of the projects that you'll see today, you'll see a lot of common cause between fine art, for instance, and sustainability initiatives. That's just one example. So without any further ado, I want to invite Phil Valko up to talk about sustainability.
Hi, good evening, everybody. How are you? Good. Good. So in a way, I'll talk tonight about creative placemaking amidst place vacating, which I think is an exceptionally challenging thing. So I'm not really talking as much about placemaking as I am talking about what to do with vacating places and how we can potentially start to think about creating place from vacant spaces. So I'll be talking tonight about the Sustainable Land Lab competition, and Don is going to dive deep into one of the specific projects that he has led with a number of other folks. So this is the context. This is a map of the city of St. Louis, and all the little dots, everything in color except for the big green areas, those are parks. Everything else is vacant land. The city of St. Louis currently has roughly 20,000 vacant parcels. About 10,000 of those are owned by the city itself, and about 10,000 are privately held. And it's spatially complicated. This is not as simple as, a whole chunk of the city is all vacant. This is on a block by block basis. You've got vacant owned by the city, vacant owned by a private entity, inhabited house, vacant owned by the city, and this really patchwork landscape of land. Very different than how this large amount of vacant space would traditionally manifest in our country. It would often be large dedicated parcels that are contiguous. There are real development opportunities. Here we've got what had been a really densely packed city, which is depopulating. So we've got infrastructure that was built for 900,000 people, and we only have about 320,000 people in the city. The city is working very, very hard to do their best to upkeep the existing infrastructure with a much smaller tax base than they've ever had before. So as part of the challenge, the city itself, I mentioned, owns about 10,000 of the vacant parcels. The city has a land bank. It's called the Land Utilization Authority. And the land bank, the LRA, over the last number of decades has essentially been, not intentionally, but acquiring land as property owners become delinquent on their property taxes or have a number of other issues. The city will essentially fall into ownership of the land. Challenge is that once the city owns it, they're not getting tax revenue off of it, and they've got the responsibility to maintain it. If it's a building, buildings are pretty costly to maintain. If it's a vacant lots are less costly, but still take time and energy to maintain. So it's a double negative, no tax revenue and then costs associated with maintenance. And in the city, which has been depopulating for 6 decades now, there's an extremely weak market. So it's not as if that land is a real strong asset that the city has to work with. And as quickly as the LRA gets land off their tax rolls, they are getting land back into the tax rolls. So it's very hard to see on this particular map, but this area, you probably heard of Palma Keys, Northside Regeneration Area. This map actually shows pretty much the entire area in blue. Because the city sold all of their LRA land to Paul for his development project, in the same year that they got about 1,000 parcels off of their rolls sold to Paul, he has to pay taxes, he has to maintain it. It's a good thing for the city. They ended up getting 1,000 other parcels back onto their roll. So in a year that was a big year for the city getting land off of their roll, it ended up just being essentially neutral for vacant land. So from an aerial view, this is what the problem looks like. This is just a spot, I think, southwest of Fairgrounds Park, if you're familiar. You can see MLK Drive is here, but essentially what used to be, I'm trying to see if there's even a spot that could resemble a populated block. Maybe somewhere in here, where there's a series of contiguous houses. Essentially, you would have had a house on every single one of these thin city lots. And now you have this interesting patchwork, lots of vacant space all around. This is wintertime. And then blocks where you'll have 5 houses, you'll have 20 houses, but this is amongst this, essentially a sea of vacancy. This is one of the most extreme places in the city. This is actually within the McKee development area, but I wanted to show a picture of essentially how bad it gets. This whole area used to be very densely populated, and traditional city lots are very thin. You can see on these blocks, those are, it's probably very hard to discern, but those are individual houses. So these blocks used to be densely packed with homes, densely packed with people, and now they are hugely vacant. So about a year ago, the university connected with the city around this topic, around the topic of vacant land. We were hosting a conference, the Sustainable Cities Conference. And as we started to discuss how sustainability should and can play out within the context of the city, there's a lot of great aspirational things that you can think about around broad stormwater management and district energy systems and integrated food systems. But oftentimes the most broad aspirational things don't connect with the realities of a city like St. Louis. So we continue to find ourselves talking about vacant space and the challenges that the city itself faces from having so much vacant land. So through these conversations in the partnership, we started to rethink, well, maybe this is an opportunity to flip the question on its head and not talk about the issue, but look at vacant land as a real asset. In a way, so as a sustainability person for the university, I think about waste a fair amount. And if you think about one aluminum can on its own, that would have pretty much no value to any of us. We couldn't do much of anything with that one aluminum can. But if you had 1 ton of aluminum cans, you have a commodity. You've got something that you can potentially melt down and remanufacture into something. You've got enough that it actually is a valuable asset. In some ways, the vacancy issue in the city has grown to the point where we need to start thinking about it as less a major problem, but potentially seeing it as an asset and seeing how we can embrace the opportunity that is sort of embedded in having 20,000 vacant parcels within the city. So university and city came together, a bunch of other partners who were really critical in moving the project forward, and we put together the Sustainable Land Lab competition, which challenged individuals and teams to propose innovative ideas to rethink vacant land, and specifically with the framework of sustainability, triple bottom line sustainability. So strategies that would benefit environmental well-being, human well-being, and economic well-being. And they could hit a series of different domains, and we were challenging folks to think about integrating different strategies if it was appropriate. So can you put together a project that somehow combines energy generation and stormwater management and habitat restoration and so on? So the competition itself, well, actually I should take a step back. The nature of the issue is really big, 20,000 vacant parcels. We wanted to do the best that we could to catalyze a conversation around the broadest scale of the challenges, but we wanted to focus on something practical and feasible. So the competition focused on specific sites and focused on essentially the scale of a single vacant lot. But we challenged teams, and Don will, I'm sure, talk about this, to think about how their idea could be scaled up. So they would be coming up with an idea that could be implemented and would be implemented if they won on a vacant parcel, but we wanted them to think about how it could either be scaled to 80 contiguous parcels or how it could be replicated, not necessarily scaled, on 80 distributed parcels. And I'll touch on that in a minute. So the competition at a glance, it kicked off just over a year ago as part of the conference. We had roughly a 5-month-long competition period, 3 rounds of submissions, and the winning teams were winning the glory of having the obligation to implement their project and maintain it for 2 years. So the folks that were applying had great ideas, and also they just had potential. They weren't the most realistic. But as it turns out, we've got amazing folks like Don who have followed through on their commitment and have shown some pretty cool results. So one of our challenges as we put it together was we needed sites. We needed money and land. And I was telling Juan before the panel that we were working closely with the city and scoping out lots of different areas of the city where we might be able to do this. And every time we were looking at an area, the key was we needed land that we could play with and try out different ideas on, not knowing what the ideas would actually be, because this was before any ideas had been submitted. And we needed some seed money for the implementation. So we ended up finding both of those things in Old North St. Louis, which is by Crown Candy Kitchen. The local organization, Old North St. Louis Restoration Group, owned a number of the parcels, and then the Land Reutilization Authority, the city's land bank, had a parcel that they put on the table, and one of the development partners for Old North had some land that they also put on the table. And we also found a funder who was willing to fund it. So the competition had 6 sites, and the premise was that there would be 4 winners. You could propose an idea that was site-specific, or you could propose an idea that could be applied on any of the sites. But since it was focused on implementation, we needed actual sites. The timeline for the competition was roughly 5 months long, and it culminated in April. So even though it was a competition, we felt it was really important to build a dialogue through this process. So midway through, we hosted a charrette where the 15 teams that had made it to the second round would come together. They'd hear the same guidance from the jurors and from the competition organizers, but they'd also have an opportunity to connect with one another and discuss and potentially collaborate. And out of this charrette, we saw, I think, about a handful of teams merge with one another, which was really wonderful for us to see that as much as it was a competition, it was also a regional collaboration to tackle a really challenging issue. So jumping to the meat, we went from 48 submissions to 15 second round teams to 8 final round teams to what was supposed to be 4, but ended up being 5 winning teams. So within the group of 8, there were 3 runners up because there were 5 winners. And I'll just quickly go through those. One of them was called Carbon Carpet, and this team was focused on basically using the power of certain plants to sequester carbon and hold carbon in soils as a key project. They also looked at the economic viability of using those harvesting the seeds from those same plants, largely native plants, and then reselling those seeds. Because as native landscaping is becoming more common, there tends to be a shortage of availability of seeds. One of the teams was focused on alternative transportation, so proposed using a very narrow site in between a couple of buildings to serve as a bike hub for the city. They were called Shift Up. team members and a couple of from Sam Fox School and a couple of neighbors in the community. And their focus was on creating a site that created a place for pollinators, for bees, for birds, created food production, and then experimenting with a set of these pervious pavers that could be mostly impervious or could be mostly pervious. And this team, of the 3 semi-finalists, or finalists rather, this team has actually moved forward even though they didn't win the award. So they are part of the Land Lab. They're working on a site that is within the Land Lab boundary area, and we're excited that they're continuing to move forward and working to support them as much as we can, because it's a great piece of knowledge addition to the project. So now onto the teams that won. One of the teams, these guys were a bit of an outlier, and I would say probably absolutely the least replicable or scalable, but there was something really compelling about what they proposed, and they had a strong team. Team Mighty Mississippians focused on learning from how the Mississippian culture lived in our region to inform how we might live in our region in the future. The Mississippian culture are the folks that built the Cahokia Mounds and had one of the biggest, if not the biggest, civilizations in North America pre-modern era. And this team has been building out their site with a solar calendar, with an edible forest of fruits and vegetables that traditionally would have been grown. And they've focused a lot on activating their site, how they can use the site as a teaching tool and an educational resource. A couple of photos from their implementation. They have hosted yoga classes out on site. This is very hard to see, but they planted up the back side of the site with corn and beans, and you can see this is some of the bounty that they've harvested: gourds, a heritage form of corn. They ended up making a big feast out of everything they harvested off the site. And then also programming the site with Native American folklore stories. So again, this team was a bit of an outlier, but they made a lot of progress this season and continue to push ahead. Our farm was focused on this idea of farm franchising. There are lots of city gardens, or urban gardens within the city. They wanted to develop a model where they could produce high yields of produce or fruits or vegetables within a small amount of area, and show that there was true economic viability for food production. So their site plan included a long greenhouse structure and then a series of different bed types that they were going to try out. They really were excited about the notion of experimentation. These guys ended up connecting with one of the other teams, Bistro Box, who I'll talk about in a minute, and they decided to actually share this site. Bistro Box is a shipping container restaurant, and they thought, well, we want to grow food, you want to serve food, why don't we pool our ideas and share the site? So the final site plan has our farm here and Bistro Box occupying this space. So here's a shot of our farm. This is where they started, a really empty site next to a parking lot, and they have started to build their greenhouse structure, external beds, the greenhouse structure, and then some internal planters. One of the lessons learned is that these types of projects can be a challenge because they don't fit into a traditional bucket. So this team actually has ended up getting a stop work order for their project, and we've been working with them in the city, since the city is a close partner in the competition, has been working with them to try to keep their project moving forward. But they've actually been required to get a zoning variance and also a building permit for their structure. And we're in the process of trying to get them through those stages of it. I'm hopeful that what we learn through this process will help us, in partnership with the city, look at how we can streamline some of those processes. So these types of innovations and trial testing of strategies can be much more quickly expedited, because a project like this that ends up getting stalled could end up just dying altogether. I think, having been a social entrepreneur myself, there's a lot to be said for momentum. And when your momentum completely stalls and you have a full-time job and you've got a family, it can be a real problem. So we need to be looking at how we can partner with the city to help folks that have good ideas, have the will to get it done, and are doing it responsibly, move forward in a safe way. So Don will talk about this project. So I will pretty much skip over it, but I'll just show you a quick little teaser before and after of their site. which was just a typical vacant site, and then ended up being this really visually stunning place to visit and pass by. Chess Pocket Park was one of the other winners. The idea is as simple as it sounds, developing a set of permanent chess tables adjacent to a high traffic, foot traffic area that could serve as a park where kids and adults in the community could go to a local business, a local not-for-profit, check out chess pieces for free, and then go sit and play a game of chess in the park. Place to mingle, place to build relationships, place to learn. Chess is a really amazing game for teaching and spatial mapping and any number of other important cognitive development things. This team let their aspirations get in the way of progress. Nothing has happened on their site. They have since significantly scaled back their aspirations to fit within the budget that they have at hand, because there's no reason that an idea that's as simply elegant as this can't be done for $5,000. A couple of permanent chess tables, a couple of things that enhance the site, and you've got a chess pocket park. So they'll be moving forward soon, but it's been a process of, in a way, it's a process of grappling with the scale of the challenge at the city level. Yes, it'd be amazing to create, the ideal site where the lighting is solar-powered lighting, and as you walk on the papers light up, and there's perfect irrigation and stormwater management, but just fairly unrealistic and costly. So grappling with the reality of resources in hand. And then finally, Bistro Box. This is our partner in the city, Catherine. Bistro Box is the most complicated of the projects, and certainly the most costly of the projects. What they proposed was to build a restaurant out of 5 shipping containers. And as you might imagine, looking at these drawings, the team had a couple of architects on it. It was strongly architecturally driven, a landscape architect, and some graphic designers. The jury, as the jury was chewing on this idea, noted that in so many ways it was impractical and expensive, but it was also really inspiring, and the team seemed to have a pretty strong will to make it happen. The team has not actually built anything yet, but they are very actively in the process of continuing to secure resources. So to date, they've gotten some major commitments from some of the bigger construction companies in the region to actually help build it. So they're getting all their ducks in a row, and we're hopeful that they'll be able to actually start construction of this and have Bistro Box up and running this next year. But we knew from the beginning that it would be probably the most complicated project to pull off, and we will all learn a lot through the process. So then I'll just wrap up with some next steps. I hope I haven't gone over my 5 to 7. I try to do PK style fast. So as I mentioned, we're really preparing to have this second full year of the Sustainable Land Lab demonstration phase be a really successful year. And Miriam Keller, Miriam, can you wave? Miriam is going to be providing some support to interface with the teams to identify what barriers they have, how they can, what support they need, and how we can leverage the resources that we have between the university and the city to make sure the projects are a success. And we've got a really great set of 6 or 5, but now with Hub 6 projects that folks can visit in summer of 2014. We're considering doing a second competition in fall 2014, but that is very open-ended. We need to do a lot of planning around it to figure out what that would look like. The university continues to work with the city, so we're looking at expanding opportunities in any number of different areas to continue to dive deep on the challenge of vacant land. And we have started to connect with a number of other cities that are working on the same issue. I didn't mention in the beginning, but this is not a unique issue to St. Louis. I'm sure folks are familiar with the scale of the challenge in Detroit, but this issue of vacancy exists in Philadelphia, in Columbus, in New Orleans, Cincinnati. It exists across the country at a similar scale to what St. Louis is grappling with. So we've got a lot of other, as much as we're trying to solve this problem and come up with creative solutions, there's a lot of other folks that are doing it as well. And we're working to connect in with them and see if we can create a network of vacancy entrepreneurs. With that, I guess I'll turn it over to the next speaker. Thank you. Hi, everybody.
everybody. Thank you very much, Leslie, for inviting me and having an opportunity to speak tonight. Just going to close out. Okay. So as Phil has mentioned already, I'm one of the members of one of the 4 winning teams, 5 winning teams for the Sustainable Land Lab competition, and part of the Sunflower Plus project, STL. And in doing this, I wanted to say that I'm not a social entrepreneur necessarily, and I'm an architect, but I've come to this project from partially my academic work and working in the city, and I approached the competition very much in a pragmatic way. I saw that there was $5,000 in an award, and that wasn't going to go very far, but that ultimately that was sort of symbolic of the city not necessarily having lots of money itself to operate. And so we felt we needed some sort of lean approach to really addressing this issue. And so basically we were looking at this very much as a scalable and transitional project for urban vacancy and addressing turning this vacancy problem into an asset. And in essence, we were looking at using the power of the sunflower as a phytoremediator and a simple strategy that we could approach across the city in what we hoped would be a fairly easy manner. So this is an example. Actually, Phil showed our second entry, and this was the first. I didn't realize it was 5 months. It was a long process for the benefit of having a 2-year lease on the project. But we really strove, and what I think you'll see, because you've seen it already in an image, is that the project is incredibly simple. It's essentially plant a field of sunflowers. And so what we tried to do was to argue or explain that this very simple process has a lot of embedded research in it, and that it would have many opportunities to address the triple bottom line sustainability objectives of the competition and the goals of the city has as well. So basically this summarizes our process, which I'll get into detail with more about the project itself. But first I wanted to go back and talk a little bit about the issue of the previously developed sites in St. Louis and sort of how I came to this. In my teaching, starting in 2006, I was working in the Ville neighborhood, which actually I think was your
first
aerial shot. We're working on an urban farmers market with the community there. And in doing that process, one of the things that we recognized, one of our challenges, was the fact that we had this capacity issue, and one of the issues that I saw was the ability to this vacant land, and that we could actually put that into production. It was the early days of urban agriculture movement, et cetera. But I also was at the point of having children of my own and recognizing that in the Ville itself, 51% of the children had lead poisoning. And I won't get into how I found that out, but ultimately that was a major issue with the city, and ultimately something that cities worked very hard in recent years to address, and has been quite successful. But it was largely because of these properties that were on its roll. And then in addition to that, my partner in this project, who we were both at the November 2nd meeting, has been on the board of Habitat for Humanity in St. Louis, and is a 30-year expert of sustainable construction and residential building, and was working with the city on this habitat project where a tremendous amount of soil was excavated and removed from urban sites in the Jeff Vanderloo area, and the city was able to fund that with some of the stimulus funding. But essentially the process involved scraping off 3 feet of the entire neighborhood and shipping it off to the landfill because it was contaminated with lead. So this seemed like a very carbon intensive and ultimately unsustainable strategy, and we thought one that might have a better option, that if we were able to, while this land sits vacant, put a powerful plant like the sunflower to work, we might have an opportunity to change the way that the city operates. So we started doing some research on phytoremediation and the power of the sunflower, which then we found actually has the ability to remediate radioactive isotopes, and in addition to uptaking lead and other heavy metals, which it is particularly good at. But it's been used at Fukushima following efforts at Chernobyl to remove these radioactive isotopes. So we thought there was the potential for attempting this powerful project here in St. Louis. So essentially our project was about just this, changing the paradigm from one of mowing vacant lots to sowing vacant lots. And essentially the city of St. Louis spends upwards, or LRA, spends $200,000 a year at just mowing vacant lots. And again, the carbon footprint of that process. We were hoping that at least we could take that, and we're arguing to try to take that and shift that money to a more productive, potentially productive process. So in addition to that, if the sites that we found that we presume would have some level of contamination, the sunflower has alternative diverse uses, from the sale of flowers to potential at scalable levels to biofuel, seed oils, of course, for edible products as well. So essentially we proposed Site Floor, which is on Warren, as a learning lab for us to experiment with this process, and we proposed a 2-year cycle of sunflowers planted, then winter wheat as a cover crop, and then sunflowers again, winter wheat, with the process of testing in between. We wanted to also reference the history, and this is sort of our placemaking effort and potentially public art, depending on how you look at it. But essentially, there were 4 buildings that sat on the site, and we wanted the people that passed by to understand, or worked with us to understand, that there were pre-existing buildings here, and then we also wanted to potentially foreshadow the future of redevelopment, which is what we would like to see happen in the city. So we constructed low rubble gabion walls with reclaimed rubble from houses that were taken down, and salvaged stone that was donated to us in gabion cages, and then used reclaimed lumber to create benches for seating, for teaching opportunities, and for the neighborhood to enjoy the space. And so just to go through the process briefly, and I'll wrap up, but this was what we saw when we were awarded the site. Actually, this is what we saw in November, but this is essentially what the site looked like previously. The first thing we did is we went and tested the site, and as you can see at the bottom here, we went and had the heavy metals screening done, and much to our surprise, our lead level was well below the 400 parts per million that the EPA recommends. And we couldn't do any testing before because we didn't know if we were going to win. But in any case, we were very pleased with this in some ways, because it allowed us to be more, engage the community more. This is one of my serious concerns after being awarded the project, that how we would address that issue. So you saw this image earlier. First thing we did is we hired an excavator. In fact, it was donated to us. Helps to have somebody who's worked 30 years in the construction business. But basically, we used a process in which we stale vetted the site. We tried to minimize the interventions to try to make it as replicable as possible. And so by flipping the soil, we were able to create microorganisms, et cetera. And so 10 days this process went on. We also recognized the way that what the city does is it collapses the buildings into its foundations, and there's a lot of building detritus and rubble in the soil, and so we knew just going in with regular plows would be dangerous and challenging. So we spent some time picking that soil. This is one of my graduate students who helped us out with the proposal. And then we had some community days when we brought folks over to the site. from the neighborhood and outside. This was a school group that joined us. And one of the students asked me, so what was this parking lot before we started digging here? And so there is a disconnection among the urban youth for what's going on in our city. And so then, because we weren't sure of when we were going to, or we were going to win, and we were behind the sort of planting cycle, we were working with this is Chris Willer, who's our an agronomist and organic farmer from the Kraut Farm, who has this amazing process, which is an incredible resource to us, but very interested in low impact farming methods. And that's me making up a hardy batch of the soil. But we decided we were going to use seedlings to improve our time frame and also hopefully improve our initial outcomes in year one. So he had this incredible little tool, and we created these little potted plants instead of the plastic containers, which actually would help for preventing any kind of seed shock or transplant shock, because the roots are all growing down. It's just a bright box. But so we planted a little seed in each one of them. These are all black widow sunflower seeds, which horticulturalists we were working with the Missouri Botanical Garden helped us to identify, because of good plant that would work in this area, and also isn't susceptible to wind damage. Also isn't particularly high, so we were concerned about having security issues in the neighborhood. We wanted to make sure that the neighbors could see over. A couple of these have 2 seeds in them. That was a mistake. Lesson learned. Next year we'll only put 1 in, because they all grew. This is what they look like 10 days later. Pretty amazing how quickly it happened. Here's our press shot. And unfortunately, Catherine's not in the picture, but there's our mayor and Richard Riley from Missouri Botanical Garden. You know Hank Weber. And Dave Weschler was a part of our team, one of the members that joined us following the charrette, and Les felt me. So there's Phil planting one of the 1,500 sunflower seedlings in full dress with some of the neighboring kids, and 12 hours later, the last man standing, and my son helping us to water. That was the only water that we really used on the site. That was another major concern. The sunflower is drought tolerant generally. I just showed this really quickly, and I'm sorry if I'm going over, but this was robin's egg, and one of the outreach moments that we had already. Obviously, it's robin's egg, but we've had an opportunity to work with a couple of neighboring children, and one 13-year-old young guy that Phil and I had the chance to play some basketball with, and hang out with. He's really super engaged in the project. It was fantastic, and he asked me, what is that? And I said, well, it's a robin's egg. And he said, what's a robin's egg? And very bright kid, but it showed me the disconnection a lot of our urban youth have with nature, and the potential for this project to have an impact in the community in that manner. Seedlings sprouting up in Old North. Quickly, they started to take hold. The field started to rise. We did a little bit of weeding in between, but we really tried to hope that they would outpower the other plants that were on site already. The soil condition, while it didn't have any heavy metals in it, was terribly poor. We didn't add any amendments to the soil. Just before, at the end of June, we saw our first sunflower, which was a surprise to me. It came out quickly thereafter. We were able to document the process of the growth sort of from the internet, and our first flower coming up, and then of course the sunflowers sprang, and these really became our kind of babies. I mean, like, we were checking them out every day and making sure they were okay, and it was pretty amazing for us, being a non-farmer, how quickly they went to seed. But one of the other benefits, we were originally going to deadhead all of the sunflowers if there was contamination, remove them so that fauna wouldn't spread the seed or be contaminated. But in this case, we were able to allow the birds to enjoy the seed that they love. And so there were flocks of golden finches and cardinals that arrived on site, which I hadn't seen in the neighborhood prior. So then people started coming out to check out the birds, which was kind of cool. So then the plants went to seed, eventually died, and we collected a portion of the seed, which we'll use again. We have pounds of it, so we're ready for another site. But we looked at the root system, which would be part of the process of uptake for the plant itself. We have tested again following this first cycle, have not gotten our test results back, just to see if we were able to measure any change from the original 62 parts per million. This is again what we saw when we started, and this is again what we left with at the end of the summer. Phil stole my punchline a little bit there. It's okay, but we installed some hunting outdoor cameras just to get some qualitative information about. It wasn't for security purposes or anything like that, but on both ends of the site, just to be able to document the process and see if maybe the community was interacting with it in ways that we weren't aware of or that we'd find interesting. You know, how many cars were stopping in front, things like that, just to see if we could measure the impact. And if you bear with me, something down here. I have a quick, we just.
Looks like you've got a link. Right.
Oh.
Right there.
Okay. Oops. So this is just a minute of 30,000 pictures that we have to date. We have two cameras, one across the street and one in the back. It just sort of shows it's actually about 1,000 pictures. But some of the process of working on it. I didn't really talk a lot about the tons of stone I hauled. I think we had 19 crates of rubble. Found out a lot of school buses went by. Actually, one of the interesting anecdotes is that they're midway through the summer, a couple people that the neighbors didn't know came and started cutting flowers and started pulling some, and they called the police, which kind of told us that, demonstrated to us that we had sort of made ourselves part of the community and that they valued our presence there. And the police, of course, showed up and said, well, we can't do anything, but that was pretty amazing evidence to us that there was an impact from the project. And we did plant winter wheat as a cover crop, and I have to go up and check out how it's doing. But just try to show that there was continued work there, and then we'll plant our next cycle of sunflowers by seed next spring. And I can get into other issues when we have the panel discussion. But thank you very much. Sorry.
So I'll just go really quickly through, oops. All right, I'll just go really quickly. Because Gretchen's not here, I wanted to talk a little bit about Pixel, which is a collaborative project with the Pulitzer Foundation for the Arts. So Pixel is a temporary intervention in Grand Center. It's on a lot across from the Pulitzer Foundation that's owned by the Pulitzer. The collaboration is made possible by an endowment from Emily Rao Pulitzer here at the Sam Fox School, and other collaborative projects have been funded through that endowment. The process for this was really an invitational call to artists and designers. So in collaboration with the Pulitzer, the Sam Fox School put out a call through 300 different organizations. So we asked for nominations for people to create a temporary project. So we were looking for really emerging designers and artists, and a lot of those 300 organizations were schools, so deans of architecture schools, art schools, also arts organizations, nominated individuals and teams, and we got eventually 60 submittals of qualifications which were reviewed, and 3 finalists were chosen and paid to develop proposals. I'm just going to show you the winning finalists for this particular project, which was freestyle architecture. The goal really was to create a temporary intervention in a vacant lot, and this is a very different, of course, context than North St. Louis, but Grand Center has kind of an issue of not really a lot of pedestrian activity. Part of the master plan, the framework plan, and then the master plan talks about really getting people to come spend time there outside of the events that people drive to see. So rather than driving there and leaving, creating actually pedestrian-friendly environment. Freestyle architecture really talked about coming here and working with community partners to program a temporary space. So they really talked about structure, space, and people, and how those things interact. They're a New York-based team, Lauren Crahan and John Hartman, who's the creative director. They actually did a site visit. They talked to half a dozen different organizations. I won't go through all of that, but they really made a sincere effort to create some partnerships here and start a dialogue about how you would program a site and activate this vacant lot, which has been used for events before, but is typically an underutilized space. So this is their proposal. They actually want to do a temporary canopy structure that's actually interactive. It's a prefabricated structure that a space grid structure, rectilinear space grid structure that supports diaphanous woven canopy that actually can be, these funnels can actually be inverted or pulled down, pulled up, pulled down. So at least that's their notion at the moment, is that there'll be some interaction with the public in how the space is designed. We'll see how that goes. And then the diaphanous material is embedded with LED lighting. They have some other ideas about a platform for the site and access to the site. So the idea is to make this more publicly accessible. This is kind of a site plan that shows a potential location, since it's a very huge vacant lot, and pedestrian paths, potential. So gardening, so they showed a lot of different activities, potential activities at the site that could happen in conjunction with the structure. But really the idea, the goal was to activate it in different ways at different times. And they're currently doing design development, and the idea is that hopefully this would be deployed in the late spring and would be there for roughly 6 months into the early fall. Probably one of the more evocative images that they showed, to activate that space, which, and you can see, this is actually looking, is it south? So you can see the Pulitzer. And images also have to do with some of the community partners they spoke with. Juan, do you want to come on?
Thank you, Leslie. Can everyone hear me okay? Thank you for reminding me of that, and thanks to the fellow panelists also. So I'm going to talk to you today about Vertigo Bee Sanctuary, which I've been working on since 2010. Like in the opening remarks, my past has to do with working within the art community and developing spaces for creativity. And so in 2010, I kind of, metaphorically speaking, stepped outside of the white box and started working more out in the public realm with collaborations and projects in North St. Louis. And it was during one of these projects in North City that I started to be intrigued by the Vertigo site. For those of you that don't know, Vertigo was a big public housing complex structure made up of 33 buildings, 11 stories, built in the 50s and came down in the 70s, and has been noted to be the worst example of public housing, and in addition, for the kind of academic side, the end of modernism. There's been tons of papers, projects, classes have been structured around this, but my interest is really when Vertigo became a vacant lot, and that this project is really an attempt to continue the conversation about Vertigo. Over the years, it has turned into an urban forest. There's a little Google map here. I believe it's 33 acres now. And it was this forest that really intrigued me to go in and investigate what was actually going on in there. As an artist, I usually, I do interact with museums and shows and stuff, but I mostly use art as a way of research and thinking about my projects. And so I went in the site taking photography, the old school way with film. And when you're shooting with film, you really have to just slow down and really take your time and make sure you go in there at certain times. And I use it as a tool to kind of slow down and to actually really kind of analyze what was going on in the site. When I first went in there, I expected to see the remains of a community. Was happy to surprise to see the beginning of a new one, and that was all the wildlife that has I started occupying the site, especially the amount of insects. And so, in particular, I was attracted to this field of wildflowers, where I started paying attention to a lot of the bees. And to take it one step further, I went in and created this small site-specific sculpture on site, and that's when the Vertigo Bee Sanctuary started. The sculpture references Yamasaki's building. So why bees? Is that in kind of analyzing the site, since the site was made for a community, I thought the site should be used for a community. And since Vertigo, the structure itself, was unnatural and that was trying to house nature, humans, and it didn't work out. But now Vertigo was nature, so what community could naturally fit in there? And for me, that community was bees. Bees function as a community. They work together. They're what they call a superorganism. This was a Super 8 film that I created about the site, starting with a cave drawing, going in and showing the different vegetation, and then the installation, and then panning out and revealing the urban setting, and then ending on another cave drawing, which I'll talk about in a second. So why do bees need a sanctuary? Obviously, if you haven't heard, bees are losing, have been vanishing, and the population has been dwindling for several years now, and that is a big issue because bees pollinate the majority of our food. It has gotten so bad, the bee population, that we actually have to import bees from Australia so we can make our crops in the United States. What was surprising is that in 2011, the census came out, and St. Louis was also losing population. So bees in St. Louis were in the same boat, and so I decided, what if we started a partnership? So it's easy to say, okay, why don't we start this partnership? But I wanted to, once again, through my art, to research and to discover what was this partnership all about. I received a grant from the Pulitzer Foundation to do some international research, which took me to Valko, Spain, which is on the southern part of Spain in the natural forest, where they have an 8,000-year-old cave drawing called the Man of Valko. The Man of Valko is a figure climbing up a tree to a beehive, and surrounding it are bees. And what was interesting is that you see this is the Man of Valko right here with all the bees, and then accompanied with it is all these all these other drawings, drawings of the hunt, tools of the hunt, domesticated animals, and other things that when I asked myself, what were humans, what was so important to actually draw and put it up on the wall 8,000 years ago, and the only thing I could really think of was survival. Food, tools, and beekeeping was part of that survival. Another question that I had to address was bees in public space. Bees have stingers, they have venom, people are scared of them. This was an article that came from St. Louis where an older person made a lady move her one beehive from a community garden. So I had to address to see if there was a model of bees in public space. So through my research, obviously St. Louis has a strong French influence, and so this is a picture of Benton Park, this is close to my house, and very French landscape architecture. And through that research, it led me to the Luxembourg Gardens in Paris, France. And this was the second part of my research trip. And in the garden, they have the oldest beekeeping school in the world, which they've been teaching Parisians beekeeping for a very long time. They have over 1 million bees in the garden. And when you get there, surprise, no one's getting stung. Everyone's kind of hanging out, drinking wine, eating cheese, in harmony with the bees. In addition, they have an orchard, along with other many flowers and gardens. And as you walk around, you can see the bees doing their work, pollinating all the plants. At the end, they have a fall harvest, which I imagine helps maintain the program. Inspired by my research and everything that I saw, I came back and kind of started to loosely put together, somewhat of an idea of what the site could be used for, which was beekeeping, agriculture, and then some kind of memorial sculpture from the existing lamppost that was on site. But before we do anything, we have to, make sure that everything works, which has been really nice to hear from my fellow panelists that you have to test things out. So what we did is that we took the proposal off the page and we implemented it in Old North at a nonprofit that I run called the Northside Workshop. And last year we started our first workshops with middle school kids from the neighborhood and other North City neighborhoods. And we led workshops in beekeeping. This is this year. We got some funding, got some bee soups. This is the Young Honey Crew. We do workshops in gardening. The great thing about bees is that when you talk about bees, you have to talk about plants, how their relationship works. And if you're wanting to make a sanctuary, you have to make sure that your plants are healthy. And then the food comes out, and then you have to talk about what you do with the food afterwards. So I really find beekeeping as a kind of umbrella of talking about many issues. And of course, art is always by my side. Once again, I see art as a way of thinking. And so this is Kim Wardenberg, a fellow WashU alumni, giving, there's our buddy Ryan there, who's been a great partner in all of our programming. He's also a WashU student in architecture department. And so these are the students still screening. And kind of, when you're doing the workshops, you're kind of in the moment of doing, and so reflection usually happens during the art, and it's just a way that they kind of personalize and kind of make their experience unique to themselves. Here's some of the banners. And so we took this vacant lot that was next to the North Side Workshop. This is what it looked, and we even got the lamppost there. This year we also were able to make some products. We have some spicy carrots that we canned, some honey, and some lip balm, along with recycled tissues that we turned into tote bags. And we constructed this farmer's market cart, which will hopefully make its way to the Old North Farmer's Market next summer. But how do we talk to youth about these big, projects? These big projects that are big plots of land. How, as an individual, can you interact and address these issues? So this is a group of students that we went to the site and did a cleaning performance exercise where we interacted with the site and cleaned up trash. Now the thing here is that yes. We are picking up trash and cleaning, but what I find really fascinating, when you do this, you actually explore and interact with the landscape. And there's been several comments here about the disconnect between the environment, land, exploring, playing. These things have been kind of, there's some kind of amnesia that's happening with the youth. And this was just a really good exercise for them to actually kind of get close, put their hands on, and then do a little activism themselves and beautify the sidewalk. This is the current bee sanctuary in Old North. This is the harmony of bees living with us. Part of the activism is what I'm doing right now, is going out and talking about this idea. I have been talking about this project, like I said, since 2010, and I travel all over the United States to campaign, try to get partnerships, to address, to see if anybody can invest in this idea of saving the Vertigo forest. This is picture that I just took. It was probably the last day of fall here, but it's one of the most peaceful spots I've been in a while in the city. And like I said, as I said about Vertigo, that there's all this energy around it as this epic failure, and this energy is still out there. And if we can come up with a strategy, a creative strategy, to kind of redirect the current, then as a people, we could take one of the worst examples of public housing and transform it into a leading example of renewal. Thank you.
So I'm sorry we ran a little long. If everybody wants to come up and join us, I can open it up just to questions since we're running a little late. Does that sound good, Allison? Yeah. So are there any questions for our panelists at this point? Yes.
How is the McKee project interacting with your project?
And actually, there's no direct connection at all. It's geographically in separate locations, so we haven't had any direct connection. Although McKee did, in partnership, I would say he did, in partnership with Jackie Joyner-Kersey and some folks, plant up a significant amount of acreage with corn and soybeans and some other crops as a test to see how large-scale urban ag could go this past summer, but we haven't had any direct connection.
What would be the phase of next phase of the sunflower project?
Well, we're basically looking at the currently planting, which we will compost that, and then this spring we'll plant another cycle of sunflowers. Having gone through the first year, we understand better about their natural cycle, and some of the things that we will look to do will include harvesting some of the earlier flowers, hopefully sell them as well, give back a little bit to the neighborhood. We'd like to, it's a capacity issue again, but ultimately develop some business modeling to promote the potential for this to be, to make an argument for the city to either take a similar project on as a remediation project. Obviously, for us to make that argument, we need to work on a site that has contamination, and so we've had some initial conversations with the city about looking at another site. One of the things, though, being an architect and coming up with maybe the argument for this is touching on an area of feeling like you don't want to do pseudoscience. So I would be interested in working with a soil scientist and possibly some folks from the EPA to make the next step a reality.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah. Don, can you elaborate on the beautiful project on the business modeling? How you're going about that right now?
Sure. Working here at the university, my ideal goal would be to work further with some of the folks in the entrepreneurship program here, Scandalaire Center. I mean, part of the problem, I think, and the reality of this is, as I said, I didn't set out to necessarily do this as a social entrepreneur project of my own. It was really more to make the argument and see if it was a plausible thing. And in some ways, I guess one of the positives that's come about of this, at least I hope it is that we've already received two serious, they're not offers, but interested parties from primarily St. Louis University that want to replicate the project in other parts of the city. And I think we can offer a lot of lessons learned. I've also found out from some of the press that we've received, thanks to the university's participation in it, that this is not a novel project. It certainly wasn't as we kind of got into the research and started finding other projects and people that have done similar things, both in Pittsburgh and Phoenix and other parts of the country. But they've run into issues, and it's often that there's a lack of funding to be able to follow through. And so we have the benefit of some funding and are hoping to tap into further resources with the city. But I think it's been a larger challenge. I mean, it's I think anybody on the panel could talk about these projects take. Well, they could easily be full-time jobs.
Can we just, so what's the funding for that project a year?
For our project?
Yeah, that
Um,
one complete project, what would you say the cost
Well,
is?
we were asked by the competition to put that forward, and I mean, we received $5,000 grant that we had at least half of that left, which the majority, frankly, of our budget went to the construction of the gate-in walls, which were about $1,600, and then the seeds themselves cost us $25, and we have free seed now, so it wasn't very costly. We did, though, get a lot of in-kind donations, and when we calculated all our time, we were looking at something around $70,000 as a budget. But we're pretty comfortable that we know that we could do it for less, and we think that there's a chance for the creation of potentially green-collar jobs, and so we'd like to think at least.
Something that Don and I had a chance to discuss while we were out hacking away at the soil one day on the site preparing for the winter wheat planting was that when done at the scale that we had the first round of the competition, the scale of the lot, there are an awful lot of inefficiencies at that scale. And the picture that Don showed of a tractor when the slide said sowing versus mowing, that is actually the equipment that the city uses to mow the land. They use farming equipment, but they use a mowing attachment. So I'm really interested as we look down the road whether there are opportunities to add a lot more mechanization so that the process can be shifted, but the outcome can essentially be the same in terms of transforming a vacant space into land that is, soils being remediated by plants and then potentially a productive thing growing. So it could be a potential trial test for the city at some point. We need to kick the tires on it a bit and discuss how we would do that, how we would scale it up to half a block or a block, and be very creative to looking at using the existing equipment that the city already has and just making slight amendments to their existing equipment so that we're working within the very real constraints that the city is under to manage that land. And I'll quickly just say, within any given year, a certain site, a certain vacant lot probably has, you can count the number of passes that a lawnmower has to go over it. It might be 20, it might be 30, it might be 15, but there's a certain amount of investment in managing that space. I'm really interested to understand, and I think this is the economic sort of modeling and projecting of what it would look like if we really were going to try to scale up the sowing version, where you get a different attachment to the tractor, you make a number of passes to prepare the soil, you make a number of passes to plant seeds, whatever maintenance passes you have to make to appreciate how different that is from an economic perspective than the current number of passes and time investment just to keep the saints as mowed grass. So there's a lot of opportunity yet. I think the way that I look at what we've been doing this last year is really, pun intended, seeding a conversation and hoping to really build on that conversation and get more sophisticated with each season in our understanding of the potential to scale up and try out different things.
I was just going to add, and following that one of the things that we have looked into, and it talks a little bit about the experiment that Paul McKee's been working with Jackie Joyner-Kersey, but really, we were talking about the potential for biofuel, and the reality is there's other supply chain issues with regard to processing locally, and then also it's the scalability question. So the tractors are great for, I think we could make a plausible argument, and I think it's not that we can't solve this, but that essentially you need 20 acres by more expert metrics to even potentially move into the biofuel realm, which ideally we could fuel that equipment with that biofuel or the city buses, et cetera, at some larger scale, and offsetting some of the carbon emissions of the city. But in order to do that, you need about 20 acres, and that number comes from the investment in a combine harvester. So you have to find an alternative to the combine harvester, which right now I think is plausibly people. And there's people out there to do that, but we have to really look at what that would be. And actually, there's quite a few people that come up to us while we're out working, asking if they could be a part of it. There was paid labor, and so fortunately we didn't do that. But I think it suggests that there is a need in our community as well for something like that.
Can I ask one?
What's the long-term vision for you? The city will be full of green spaces or biofuel spaces? I mean, you don't see population coming back, or what do you see in the far, what do you want to see in the far?
But I probably glossed over it. It's usually the first slide for me, but ideally, the city is redeveloped with increased population. So that may not happen, but that's why we made the proposal as a transitional idea. It really wasn't about making an urban agriculture proposal, because I think that, frankly, one of the issues is that too much of the land is potentially threatened relative to contamination. And I think it's a very arduous process to go through and well, we have to obviously test each parcel, especially because one of the things you have to be concerned about, and one of the things that we were looking at is the chain of custody. You don't want to move the lead in a stable. If the lead's in the ground in the stable, you don't want to suddenly put it in the atmosphere by burning it, and you have to have the proper sequestration within whatever manufacturing you would have for that. So, I think that there's something pretty powerful about flying over the city and seeing fields of yellow sunflowers. But my hope would be that we would densify the city and preserve our agricultural lands for the growing of food and sorry.
Yeah, thanks.
When do you expect to report back on the heavy metals? And you explained a little bit about the sunfire resolving some of that problem. Can you explain more of that, how it does resolve the problems of heavy metals?
Sure. The sunflower is a hyperaccumulator. It's a plant that has an ability to absorb contaminants, and in particular, our research shows, and it's nothing that I'm not a soil scientist, but in looking at the different plants, it's easily found many resources as to what are the particular plants that will help with certain uptake of different conditions, and it's one of the reasons that I saw Juan's gardens wisely were all planted in raised beds, and that's generally the recommendation across the city is just plant raised beds, use any kind of root barrier between the existing soil and put new soil in. So relative to the site that we were awarded for the competition, it turned out that our site had no level of contamination. It was well below. The EPA requires 400 parts per million as the threshold, and ours was 62 parts per million. So right now, our second test is really just to see if there was any change, and we're awaiting those results. We'll still go through the cycle of testing and check that, but there's lots of chemistry, soil chemistry, relative to the way that it can attach to the root system and move through the plant that I'm bordering on my extent of my knowledge, but that was part of the whole experiment, was for us to be able to understand that better.
Don, can I just ask a question about policy? So you're talking to the city of St. Louis, and this is actually a city issue. I really commend you. You said it was since you had a child, hearing that 53% of children have lead poisoning compelled you to this. You kind of arrived, you're an architect, I understand. Now, the problem is, this is something at the leadership level, because this is a beautiful solution to remediate land. And it's not an art project, it's actually something very reasonable to do to clean up lots of floods in the city. And actually that would then lead itself to people investing, people not getting lead poisoning. So I think the missing piece for me here is how much you're pushing. I mean, it's all falling on you and, as a studio project, which made it possible for you with $5,000 take an experiment, which are unfortunately hasn't given you full results, like this gentleman was asking, which I can't wait for you to find out. This is going to be a phenomenal result. It's helpful. But really, I think at this point is also as architects and designers to push it at the sort of the city hall level to invest in projects that ultimately benefit the city of St. Louis and not something that should fall off your shoulder on top of everything else.
I'll answer briefly, and then hopefully it'll be a question for any other panelists here too, and Juan's incredible project too, which unfortunately I'm allergic to bees, but I'd like to hang out with them.
You saw the garden in Paris?
Yeah, I know. I'm just kidding. I'm mildly relative to the city, I mean, I think that the city has been a great partner in this project. They're at the table, and Catherine had to step out, but her role in the city as director of sustainability is a relatively new position, and she's been reappointed, and it's part of an opportunity to promote that. One of the things, just briefly, that I had an opportunity when we found out that this site did not have high contamination levels, was to look to the city to see if there were other sites that we could work on that weren't Superfund sites or absolutely known brownfield sites, and then you sort of get in underneath a little bit and find out that there's one environmental engineer at the city, and that the city has no resources for this, and they're thankful to be able to get an invitation to meet with that person, and they were able to reflect on the money spent on the JVL project that I pointed to earlier, because and the comment was we want to do more. We were hoping to get more stimulus because we could do more for our community and do these projects, and so that's sort of where we've left it. But I think the will is there. It's just it's a question of finances as well.
Yeah, I think it's that in Grand Center, if you read the master plan, they talk about $2 million of infrastructure investment from the city since the late 1980s. So that's not a lot spent in the last 25 years for what's been a kind of relatively successful redevelopment of an entertainment district.
That I think equals more private in the public-private partnership. But I think it gets back to community. I mean, that's one of the reasons Old North was chosen, I think, by Juan, by the Land Lab competition. It's got there are people there that have been there for a long time. They're anchor institutions, but there's also a revitalizing community with folks who care about they're hanging on in many ways. But I think, and not that everyone doesn't care about the community, but there's a bit of momentum in that neighborhood that I think, you're a resident, you can probably talk better to it.
I guess the context that I would share is that there's 60 years of decline that we're working against, and we're 1 year into our process of thinking about how to approach it at scale. And I think we've got some good ideas on the table. We've got some good demonstration projects that folks like Don have invested a lot of time in, but we have many steps and opportunities ahead of us to continue to build on it. And as Don said, it's not a lack of will. The city really has the will to tackle. They just don't have the capacity right now. So the partnership with the university and the city, and hopefully bringing potentially some private sector folks on board as well, could help scale up some of these ideas and could help us tackle the issue at the scale that's appropriate for the scale of the problem.
I think it would be great to see how it could be implemented with taxpayers. I mean, it's just a beautiful work, and I think the next level is to get public policy people involved, to kind of see this is started as a sort of creative project, but it brings change, and it needs the kind of funding that 5,000 here, 5,000 there. It would really if one had economic development people from different departments, a few policymakers, lawyers, to just figure out, do a real estate calculation and see how much would the city benefit, rather than one art project here, one art project there, but really looking as a policy issue and allocating funding for this kind of project.
A question in the back?
Question for Juan. I'm curious about the Pruitt-Igoe forest and what else you saw in there, and any other signs of people congregating there or living in there. Also, can an average person go in, and have any ecologists been on site to study what the hell is going on?
Oh yeah, I mean, technically, I guess you're not supposed to go in there. But,
You didn't hear that.
yeah. Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, Michael Allen he's really from preservation research. Yeah, I mean, he's known for his famous tours. He gives a great tour of Vertigo, and yeah, he did that here.
Michael Allen.
Michael Allen. He's yeah, historical preservation. He knows like tons of information about the city, and if he's giving you a tour, it's definitely just a really fun and really informative tour. He also writes regularly about Pruitt-Igoe, and he actually spearheaded the Pruitt-Igoe Now design competition. So yeah, and then besides that, I mean, definitely people, interested in history, urban explorers, they go in there and check it out. Most likely, I mean, there's some trash in there, but it's pretty much just trees and invasive weeds and things like that, and a lot of animals.
And some sculptured bees.
Some sculptures and bees.
Yeah, I also on the Pruitt-Igoe thing, as a person who's incredibly intrigued by the failure of that project and the state of the space as it is now, I'm wondering, it's so infamous. I'm wondering what kind of energy you felt around not only your project, but just, ideas for, it's such a huge space, you could do so many, you could do the bee project, you could do so many things in such a huge space, and if you looked into sort of, I guess, larger funding, because it's such a big scale, it's so known,
Yeah, well, to kind of bring it back to creative placemaking, which is, I think, with the gentleman up here that Phil with his work with Urban Studio, and then with the Sunflower, is that there's an endless list of ideas. What comes after is programming and how you activate the site. And I think that's out of all the Land Lab submissions, the kind of simplicity of Sunflowers probably to this point has a lot of impact, because it's with the budget and everything, it's all appropriate. For me, I think the site can just with some minor design and some management, it can just exist as it is. And then working obviously with other organizations to make it safe to be in there, and more discovery of what's in the soil and things like that. I mean, when you're in there, it's such a unique space in terms of green space. It's nothing like it in the city, and it is really like an urban forest. So I mean, I think the beauty for me about the project is that you have this epic art structure, and then it kind of gets destroyed, and then what comes is this epic forest, which for me is another form of public art, and so letting it be the forest, activated by programming, I think is definitely some of the first steps of kind of talking about activating the site.
Could there be ecological or even
artistic value in doing a controlled burn from the site?
I mean, I'm an artist, so like, I would have to like be working with somebody that would, that could advise me on the control burn. I
Or on
think
any vacant land through the city?
possibly.
But why control burn? What
Yeah,
would that
kind of,
be?
it's a question of in service of what. On most of the current vacant mowed lots, it wouldn't necessarily be in service of anything in particular, because you're not activating seed, or you're not adding nutrients to the soil, or killing off weeds. It's all weeds. So I think it could be
Like
interesting.
bring native species back?
I think it could be an interesting strategy in the context of a much bigger strategy. So, should the city look at taking a lot of that land and do prairie restoration? Control burns could definitely be a piece of the overall picture, but it really would be that context of, what's the purpose and service of what, is my question.
Just grab the microphone again just briefly because of some of the research on remediation and some of my parallel work in the neighborhood. My understanding is that the state and the federal government are fighting over the cost of remediating the Vertigo site right now. And one's saying 15 million and they're saying 30 million, and the number keeps going up because they can't. And that's not about forest. That's like what's underground. So I think that the challenges there go deeper. Doesn't suggest that it shouldn't stay a forest. I mean, it's a very good reason, but I have some concerns, I think others do, about what's below the ground there because of the way that the site was left when it was demolished. So I think it's just another layer of consideration to think
What would be
about.
like main concerns on that regard? Because if there's a forest there, I mean, obviously things can grow there. And are
Yeah.
you talking mainly like toxicity, like for people being in there? Or?
I can't speak to, I think it's probably about something to do with the water. It's really what's contained in the soil below ground and disturbing it. So, it's with a lot of the leads and or the heavy metals, et cetera, it's the particulate matter. It's moving it and getting it up in the air, breathing it in, absorbing it into your body. If there's a heavy concentration of lead in the soil, one of the main reasons that urban kids, particularly in neighborhoods like the Ville, get lead poisoning is that they're often playing in and around areas where its largest issue is inside houses that had lead paint, obviously, but then a lot of the neighborhoods where buildings are left to decay and they're part of the neighborhood fabric. If kids are playing around that, if they're eating dirt, young kids playing around, obviously washing hands there, and that's one of the main ways that they consume it. So if you're bringing children into areas, you have to be very careful. It's one of the things we were trying to be very conscious of on the site if we were dealing with the kind of paradox of dealing with community and dealing with a remediation project.
I'm thinking about all these projects from the perspective of the triple bottom line, and and I understand there was not a lot of money, financial capital involved. So I think from that perspective, it seems like there's been a relative amount of success. I'm wondering, Don, if it turns out that there isn't remediation of heavy metals, would you feel like that the Sunflower project was still a success? I mean, it seems like we were able to activate the space, we were able to improve it visually, environmentally, and do it at a low cost.
Yeah, those are all our arguments that we made. We kind of came at it with the idea of remediation as the sort of central theme, but we quickly had to change our argument a little bit. And in fact, I was actually having some difficulty thinking about how I was going to present the project in this format. But now that we're sort of a quarter in, I was think it's like 1 year, but it's not been because we just went through one cycle. But no, I think that there are potential, again, with capacity, people come forward and help if somebody's very interested in this. But I think there's a potential for local flower sales. The ornamentals, Whole Foods sells California sunflowers are $5 a bunch, and I think that there's the possibility of reaching out in that way. More importantly, selling them locally. We had some initial conversations with some florists on Cherokee who sell local florists, but they're having some struggles themselves, and so I think that there are other potentials. But Yasmin was sort of getting at this a little bit, but I think that one of the interesting questions for me is, we've started debating this amongst ourselves. After 2 years, I don't know, if we're going to have the capacity to continue. I'd love to, be able to. But I'm hoping that this will become part of the community in such a way that people want it, that they'll expect it. And then when our lease is up, if we don't have the capacity to continue it, that it will continue. And it would be interesting to see if the neighborhood, one of the things I didn't tell an anecdote, but we had people come and take pictures, wedding pictures in the field of sunflowers, Yeah. So, there was already a kind of destination placemaking about this. So who knows, that was kind of one of our, not really central themes, but the idea of that, Crown Candy is a known entity in the area, central place, but maybe the neighborhood is known for being a place where the sunflowers grow or something.
Sure. Is there one more question?
Yeah, just for the Vertigo space, if it's going to cost $15 to $30 million to clean it up, how do you come up with a community project that is worth it for the city to invest, or even for the federal government to invest in that cleanup? I feel like often with these community projects, they're not often seen as economically viable. The environmental and the social side is great, but then how are we making a profit off of it? So how does that play into your plans, and how you think of moving forward with this type of project when you're working with the city as a partner or private developers?
Right. Well, a couple of different things. Is I think the history of Vertigo is worth $30 million. To say that, and also green space, definitely worth that type of money. If you look at other different villages or towns in the city, that kind of money is being spent all the time. I heard something about there's an abandoned church in Grand Center, and they put $700,000 just to save it, and then you can't even really access it. So money is there, and I think Vertigo is definitely a worthy cause to put money into that. In terms of economic, and if you would get your money back, I think you possibly can get your money back in terms of cultural capital. You have to understand that Vertigo is outside of St. Louis. It's one of the things that are talked about constantly in all these different fields. So not just bringing people to check it out, which it constantly does, and just activating that space itself would be good just for that section. Plus, when's the last time there has been a big civic positive project in North St. Louis? I think we're due. So I don't really look at it as this value in black or white, but in the long term, it is totally valuable. And all parts of the city have gotten their fancy redevelopment, and so I think it's time for North St. Louis to do that too. Can you imagine this is somewhat the scarlet that has the biggest taboo, to the point where, you know, we planted trees to kind of forget about it, sweep it underneath the rug. And now to celebrate that and for it to be a leading example. I mean, I think that's, you know, not to say that's not worth more than money, but I think, you know, it would have an incredible economic impact.
Well, thank you all for your patience, and maybe you'll join me in thanking our panelists.